Hey guys, it's Andriatic. Juno is the newest support hero that was added to Overwatch 2, and I've spent quite a bit of time playing her and testing out what I think works best, so I decided I'd make a quick guide that covers everything you need to improve your Juno gameplay. The format of this guide will cover both basic information about Juno as well as advanced tips that I think would be beneficial to players of all skill levels. I'll begin by explaining Juno's kit as a whole and go through each ability, what they do, the best ways to use them, and various tips and tricks that apply to the ability. Also, Juno has a couple hero-specific settings that I recommend you use, so I'll explain them later on when they're relevant to what they affect. Finally, once I've fully explained her kit, I'll talk a little bit about what role Juno fills within a team and what her general playstyle should be. With that out of the way, let's get right into it and start with Juno's passive abilities. Juno, being a support hero, has the same base support passive that all support heroes have, which means she'll begin regenerating HP after 2.5 seconds of not taking damage. This is actually pretty important because unlike most support heroes, Juno actually has no way of self-healing outside of this passive, so be sure to keep that in mind and duck into cover quickly to start regenerating if you get low. This should be no problem though considering her high mobility. Speaking of mobility, Juno's second passive are her Martian boots. These allow her to double jump similar to how Genji does. You just simply press your jump binding mid-air to perform this. Additionally, Martian boots give Juno the ability to hover similar to how Mercy and Echo can, so this can allow you to stay airborne longer or can allow you to traverse the map easier. Now let's move on to Juno's primary source of healing and damage, the Mediblaster. The Mediblaster is a burst fire weapon that functions similar to Ana's biotic rifle. Shooting your allies will heal them, and shooting enemies will damage them. The Mediblaster shoots 12 bullets per burst with 8 damage per bullet, or 7 healing per bullet. Assuming you hit every shot in the burst, this equates to a maximum DPS of 109 and a maximum HPS of 95. The Mediblaster is unable to crit and also has falloff starting at 30 meters and ending at 50 meters, so she's most effective at mid-ranges. This actually makes her the first support hero to have healing falloff, which is interesting, but something to keep in mind when healing teammates who are farther away from you. Her healing on single targets is excellent, and assuming every bullet from a burst hits, she actually has a higher HPS than Ana does, making her great at sustaining teammates, especially tanks. You may have noticed based on these stats that the Mediblaster actually does more damage than it does healing. It's not by much, but this makes Juno particularly good at weaving in both healing and damage shots for poke in the mid-fight. Although her damage is higher than her healing, she can struggle to confirm kills on her own due to the recovery time between bursts, and this doesn't account for bullets within bursts that may have been missed. Assuming you hit every bullet and the enemy is not getting healed, it will take Juno 3 bursts to eliminate an enemy. For that reason, I think the damage from the Mediblaster is best utilized for poke and pressuring enemies as opposed to flanking and getting quick kills like Kiriko might, for example. Weaving in healing and damage during a fight according to the situation is the most efficient way to utilize the Mediblaster in my opinion. This isn't to say that Juno has a low kill potential, because she certainly does, but I think there's better ways to use it, and I find her playstyle to be more opportunistic, but I'll talk more about that later. Juno's first ability, which is bound to her secondary fire, is Pulsar Torpedoes. This ability is performed by pressing your secondary fire, after which the ability will charge and lock onto anyone within your current line of sight. After the lock-on phase, the ability will have locked onto your targets so long as they remain in your line of sight. The pulsars can then be activated via the primary fire, or will fire automatically if the targeting duration ends. Also, quick note, if you use Pulsar Torpedoes and they don't lock onto anything, the cooldown will be reduced to 2 seconds from its usual 10. Once fired, the torpedoes will home in and follow their target until they're either connected, the target moves behind cover, dies, the torpedoes are deflected, eaten, dodged, etc. If the torpedoes hit an enemy, they will do an instant 85 damage to the hero. If they hit an ally, they will do an instant 85 healing and then another 50 healing over time for a total of 135 healing. Really quickly, before we move on to some more details about the ability, I would like to suggest a hero-specific setting regarding this ability that, in my opinion, improves the fluidity of it. Juno has a setting called Toggle Pulsar Torpedoes. The default setting is on, which means that in order to use Pulsar Torpedoes, you need to press your secondary fire, and then once you've locked on to your desired targets, press the primary fire to use the pulsars. Alternatively, you can turn this setting off, which means instead you need to hold down secondary fire to lock on, and then whenever you let go, they'll automatically fire. I find this setting to be a bit more fluid as you aren't having to press multiple buttons to use the ability, and you can better control when to start the ability and fire it as you're simply pressing the button and letting go as needed. Obviously, a setting like this is preference, but I believe this setting feels much better and would suggest you try it out if you haven't already. Moving on, let's talk about important aspects of this ability that you should understand when using it. Firstly, it's important to note that the lock-on time for pulsars scales based on distance and that targets closer to you will lock on faster than those farther away. This scale ranges from 0.5 seconds to 1 full second. It's also important to note that the max targeting range is 40 meters, although once you've locked on and fired a pulsar towards an enemy, the pulsars have no max travel distance. Also, similar to how Cassidy's Deadeye works, the lock-on progress will pause if a target moves behind cover, or 5 meters beyond the maximum targeting range, but will continue if that target comes back into your LOS or within range. As mentioned before, the torpedoes can be blocked by shields or dodged if a target uses cover. However, the restrictions regarding this are more lenient towards healing pulsars towards allies. Similar to Lifeweaver's Blossoms, pulsars that are homing in on allies will round corners or even go slightly through walls to follow and heal allies in situations where damage-dealing torpedoes would not. Finally, Pulsar Torpedoes are a channeled ability, and while targeting, Juno is unable to use her primary fire while using the ability. She's also able to be stunned or hacked during this ability, which will cancel them. This ability is very flexible and has a wide range of uses. Its healing is stronger than its damage, so it can be good for healing large groups of targets at once. Just keep in mind that you will be unable to use the Mediblaster for healing during this time, and that during the lock-on portion of the ability, you will be unable to heal anyone at all. This is important to keep in mind, because although Pulsar Torpedoes does excellent healing when used on multiple targets, the single target healing and HPS is weaker than that of the Mediblaster's healing when used on a single target. For this reason, the Mediblaster is best used on one target at a time, whereas Pulsar Torpedoes is best used when multiple allies are in need. So, in terms of healing, the best time to use Pulsar Torpedoes is when multiple allies are around half HP, I would say. Anything less and you risk an ally being burst down before the torpedoes can actually lock on and fire. In terms of damage, Pulsar Torpedoes does an excellent job of tagging enemies and making them a little squishier. Combined with Pulsars, the Mediblaster can eliminate most heroes in 2 bursts rather than 3, allowing Juno to get quick eliminations on enemies who may be exposed or out of position. This is one of my favorite ways to use the ability. I find that you can get the most impact by using the ability to quickly punish enemies who have made a positional mistake or may have no cooldowns. Even if you're unable to confirm the elimination yourself, in most cases someone on your team should be able to follow up with this, which can quickly turn the tide in a fight. When using Pulsar Torpedoes on enemies, you almost always want to use them during the mid-fight, where enemies are already engaged in active combat and less likely to be able to dodge them. This can also help you assist your teammates. They work great towards the end of fights as well due to their homing mechanic, so they're great for tagging low-health enemies who are trying to escape. With all that in mind, try to use Pulsar Torpedoes in situations where you can hit as many people as possible for the most value. I personally find myself using them more for damage than I do healing, but it is best to read the situation and use them in whichever way you feel is the most appropriate. Sometimes that may be exclusively for damage, and sometimes that may be exclusively for healing, but in most cases you will be trying to want to aim to hit both allies and enemies. Glideboost is Juno's primary movement ability and is what helps classify her as a mobile hero that falls within the 225 HP health pool. Glideboost is a movement ability that allows Juno to hover and glide in the air across a singular Y-axis. By pressing your jump binding during Glideboost, you can also perform your double jump to continue gliding at a higher altitude than you would have before. There are some restrictions to this ability, however. Juno's locked into whatever Y-axis plane she's in throughout the boost and can't lower herself without canceling the ability. She can also only double jump once, so she's unable to move upwards if she's already double jumped, although you can hug certain slanted surfaces and walls to climb them. Glideboost allows Juno to quickly traverse through the map relatively easily and is great for dodging enemy attacks. It also allows Juno to quickly reposition so that she can help her team or chase down enemies. Glideboost begins with an initial dash and then continues with a hover, making it great as a reactionary tool, allowing you to dodge incoming attacks. However, due to the restrictions Glideboost has, if you are using Glideboost to dodge enemy attacks, it may be more helpful to think proactively about what you want to dodge as opposed to dodging purely reactively. This is because once you've used Glideboost or jumped, you're locked into a singular plane, which can make your movement relatively easy to predict. If you're expecting to get dove by an enemy or saving the ability to dodge specific enemy cooldowns, you can plan out specific escape routes or positions you want to take with the following glide after the dash. This will help you react with Glideboost more appropriately when someone tries to pursue you. With that being said, Glideboost does have a relatively short cooldown at only 6 seconds, so it can be used fairly liberally. Due to its flexibility, it's great at keeping you alive, as well as allowing you to quickly get to allies in need or enemies who may be trying to escape. It's also great for getting LOS on more targets so you can get more value from your pulsars. Finally, there is a hero-specific setting for Glideboost that is similar to the Pulsar Torpedoes one. By default, Juno has toggle Glideboost on, which makes it so that you can activate Glideboost by pressing the button, and in order to cancel it, you have to press the button again. Personally, I find turning this setting off to be a bit more beneficial, because toggle Glideboost off makes it so that you have to hold the button throughout the duration of the Glideboost, and letting go of the button is what cancels it. I like this better personally, as I find myself canceling Glideboost often, and it's more reactive this way, especially if you find yourself needing to descend or drop quickly, since Glideboost doesn't have that option and must be cancelled to do so. Hyper Ring is an ability that deploys a ring that increases you and your allies' movement speed after they pass through it. This ability is Juno's main form of utility and what makes her so good in brawl compositions. Deploying Hyper Ring automatically grants Juno and any ally near her with a speed boost even without passing through the ring. Passing through the ring multiple times will not stack the speed, but instead make the effect last longer by resetting the timer of the granted speed boost. Hyper Ring has a fairly long cooldown at 14 seconds, but the cooldown starts when the ring is deployed. Hyper Ring lasts 6 seconds, so one of my favorite tips regarding this ability, especially on Koth maps, is to use the Hyper Ring about 5 seconds before the spawn doors open. This will allow your team to get the speed boost and get to the point faster, and you'll then be able to deploy another Hyper Ring sooner. Hyper Ring is best utilized as an engagement or an escape tool for your team. Use it to initiate fights and to speed your team into the enemy, or use it to get your team to safety after a fight starts to favor the enemy. If you're communicating with your tank, they may tell you when they want to engage and when they want the speed boost. Otherwise, one of the best times to use it for an engage is when you see an early advantage, or as a way to speed your team into an enemy who may be isolated to help punish them for their bad positioning. It's also not a bad idea to use Hyper Ring on yourself in order to help you either escape or get to an ally who may need healing. If you play Lucio at all, Hyper Ring is very comparable to his amped speed and should be used pretty much the same way for the most part. Juno's ultimate ability is Orbital Ray. Upon activation and after a short cast time, Orbital Ray will deploy a beam that slowly travels forward in whichever direction Juno was facing when she activated it. Orbital Ray heals all allies within its radius for 100 HPS and increases their damage dealt by 35%. It's sorta like if Mercy's two beams were combined into one and stronger. Because of the healing output and the damage increase, Orbital Ray is a great initiation tool. Especially when combined with Hyper Ring, it can be very useful for initiating a teamfight. The timing for the Ray should be similar to that of Kiriko's Kitsune Rush. It's great at initiating fights, but can also be used reactively to turn the tide of a fight as needed. The linear path of the Ray can also help zone out areas similar to how Kitsune Rush works, as the enemy team will want to avoid taking fights within the Ray. In order to increase your effectiveness, using the Ray in areas where it may be harder for the enemy to disengage will allow your team to get the most value out of it. Since it has a fairly decent HPS output, you can also use it reactively to help save teammates, particularly tanks, who may need it. Just keep in mind that Orbital Ray does have a fairly long cast animation that Juno cannot heal during, so you need to use the Ray quickly in these scenarios to ensure that your ally doesn't die before the Ray actually deploys. On the topic of its healing is strong, but it's much weaker than something like Zenyatta's Transcendence, for example, and due to the travel time, it's not very effective versus ultimates like Zarya's Graviton Surge, where the travel may cause it to just move right out of it. However, it does work better versus things like Reinhardt's Earth Shatter if placed correctly due to the wider area that it covers. You can also use it selfishly to save yourself, but if you use it like this, try to make sure the raid travels forwards towards your team so that they can use it too if possible. Now that we've covered Juno's kit as a whole and what each ability does, let's talk a little bit about what her role is in a team and what her best playstyles are. Juno plays best in Brawl and Rush type compositions, as Hyper Ring pairs particularly well with these comps. However, she is useful in some dive comps due to her high mobility and the fact that Hyper Ring also works well with Diva in particular, I think.
It's him. He's out.
Get him!
I'm chasing him, girl.
Oh my god, girl! In dive compositions, Hyper Ring is better utilized mid-fight after everyone has dove in, where Brawl comps it's better used to initiate. Issues do arrive when dive when it comes to her ultimate a little bit, because the Ray does travel too slow for most dive composition heroes, and it restricts their movement if they want to stay within it. Also, most of them don't really need Hyper Ring as much as someone like, say, Reinhardt or Ramattra would benefit from it. Juno has a fairly high healing output, higher than that of Ana even, so she can easily fill the role as a support that does a bulk of the healing if needed. Her weapon is also fairly easy to aim, and so her healing output is very consistent. She's extremely good at hard-pocketing one teammate and keeping them alive through a decent amount of damage. Due to the Mediblaster being a burst weapon, she can technically heal multiple allies at once if she shoots across multiple people, but it is less effective like this and it's best utilized on single targets. Despite her high healing, it's important to not forget about her damage, since she does have a pretty good damage output. I find that she's most effective when she's weaving in damage shots while healing, poking, and waiting for opportunities to commit onto someone. As I mentioned before, Pulsar Torpedoes is particularly good at assisting with this and is great for punishing enemies who are low or out of position. It's very easy to heal and poke with her, and then quickly use your Glideboost/torpedoes to pick off an enemy who may be exposed. I personally find that Juno's damage is great, but is very opportunistic in this sense, so I personally spend most of my time healing and poking and committing on opportunities as they arise, as opposed to hard flanking on her for damage. I've been having a lot of fun playing Juno, and find that her gameplay can be pretty rewarding when used properly. Her speed boost can be very punishing for the enemy if used correctly, allowing your team to quickly engage or disengage, and I personally enjoy the heal and poke playstyle that I mentioned before. I don't really have much more to say regarding Juno in this guide in particular. This video was mostly constructed as a way that I could help people understand how Juno works and some basic concepts around her. That's why I decided to share some tips regarding each ability, their best usages, and then the general playstyle. There are a variety of other playstyles that may fit Juno, and I'm sure more will arise later as the hero is of course still fairly new, but I decided to share a playstyle that I personally have been having success with while playing her. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like a more advanced Juno guide that covers more micro plays and such, or other guides like this in general for other support heroes, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. Hey, so this is me after editing this video. If you've been following me pretty closely, you'll know that it's been like over a year since I last uploaded. That was because I've been busy with school, but I actually just graduated this summer, so until I find a master's program to get into, I'm free from school basically. So it's been a while, and you can probably tell, like, I probably sound like super dead in this video compared to like my other ones because it's like super weird editing again, but I am trying to get back into swinging things and upload some more content. So if you're new here, I do mostly support content. I'm mostly known for my Mercy, but I'm trying to get ideas to post more stuff just regarding supports in general. So that's why when Juno came out, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make a guide regarding her. So thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around if you have, and thanks for being patient. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I can get up some more content soon, so thanks. Bye.